All right, thanks for coming out, slipping and sliding today. Got a little slick out there in a few places today, but you're here. I think they're plowing something because I keep seeing the flashing lights come by here. Revelation chapter 10 we're going to tonight. Thanks to Brother Tom for covering last week. We had a bunch of teens to our house. Revelation chapter 10. What do you like best? The first, anyway. The good news or the bad news? Has anyone ever asked you that? Come say, look, what do you want first? The good news or the bad news? And what do you always say? Everybody wants the bad news first. That's me, because maybe you can cheer me up, right? If you give me the bad news, then, maybe the good news will offset that a little bit. Well, as we get into Revelation chapter 10 tonight, we have bad news and good news. Okay, so the title is Sharing a Bittersweet Message. It's bitter and it's sweet. So John gets this, what we can call disturbing news. We have all these judgments and things that are happening here in the book of Revelation, but he has one that's bittersweet. So this is where we are, just to get us set up, because you've had a couple of weeks off this series here. John is getting vision about judgments that are going to come. He's been ushered there in the throne room of God, and he gets all these great visions, and there's a scroll that he saw that was sealed with 7 seals. And he watched as one by one these seals are peeled off the scroll, and every time a seal is taken off the scroll, a judgment comes upon the earth. Well, then we get to the 7th seal. When that one is peeled off, it introduces another set of judgments. This time 7 angels with trumpets show up, and every time an angel sounds his trumpet, there's another judgment on mankind, another judgment on the world. So where we are now is we are between the 6th and the 7th angel sounding. We're waiting for the 7th. We finished the 6th, and it's almost like we have a little lull here because something happens, and it's very interesting. So if you want to look with me, Revelation chapter 10, verse 1. Understand what we just talked about. John says, I saw still another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. Don't you just love how John describes what he sees in this book? Now, we sometimes we try to put too much stock in the details, but John is seeing this vision. He's trying to describe what he's seeing. And so, who is the angel? Some people question, if you read some books, some people, some people think it's Jesus. I don't think it's Jesus, because when Jesus shows up here in the book of Revelation, it's pretty clear who it is. And it just talks about a strong angel. So it doesn't seem to me this is Jesus. It's just another one of these angels. God has these magnificent creatures, if we can call them, spiritual beings that show up through this book. And so here one of them shows up, and John says, this is how I'm describing him, okay? Clothed with a cloud, a rainbow was on his head, his face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. So this is a very interesting looking angel, but that's not what's so interesting about him. Verse 2, and he had a little book in his hand. So John looks and he sees this angel here, artist rendition of it here, an angel standing there, and he's holding this book. Now, when we say book, we think of a book with, a binder and everything else, right? But in John's day, it was a scroll. That's what they use in scrolls. But this is different. Remember, we already saw the scroll, the one that had the 7 seals, and it was opened up. Some people think, well, it's the same one. But it's not, because this time it is a little book. The Greek words behind us is a diminutive form of the book. So it's like the difference between a book and a booklet, okay? A pamphlet, so to speak. So this isn't the same scroll where the seals were peeled off and there were judgments that came out. This is a different book, a different scroll that John sees here. And of course, he's interested in this one. And one thing about this is that it was open. The first scroll we saw was all sealed with the 7 seals, and this was open, indicating that this is something that people are supposed to know what's written inside. So John looks at this, and he said there was a little book in his hand, and he said his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. And so picture this angel here, and he's got one foot on the sea, and he's got one foot on the land. And I think it doesn't really tell us why he's standing like this, but it seems to indicate control over everything, control over the sea, control over the land. So this is a very important angel with a very important message. And so John, of course, is interested in just what we're going to find out here. Verse 3, and he cried, this is the angel, cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roars. When he cried out, 7 thunders uttered their voices. So this angel cried out, and it sounded like a lion, and then thunders said something. Now when the 7 thunders uttered their voices, I was about to write. But I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, seal up the things which the 7 thunders uttered, and do not write them. I think that's a bummer. I mean, if you really get to thinking about this, what did the thunders... I've never heard the thunder speak. I hear thunder, but it does not say anything. Well, this angel made some loud cry, and the thunders said something, and John says, man, they got to hear this, and he starts to write it down, and he says, here's a voice that says, nope, don't write it down. Seal it up. Nobody gets to know what the thunder said. That will drive you crazy if you think about it for a while. We're not going to know. Maybe one day get to heaven, somebody write that down, okay? I'm going to ask what the thunder said. It said seal it up, so maybe some point we'll know. But as far as I know, we're not told anywhere. This is just not the time to know. So we have to forget that, and we have to move on, okay? There's some things God just doesn't want us to know. But what we do know is that there is a message that's given to John, and the message is good and it's bad. And this is what the symbol of the little booklet is, the little scroll there. It's a message that John is supposed to share. And it's also a message we will see that we are supposed to share. And so this is very important. As John's supposed to share this message, we're supposed to share the same thing. So we're going to look at this message. And so the first point we have is we have a terrifying message. We're going to look at what this message is, okay? Because the message John has to share is the same message we have to share. Look at verse 5. Chapter 10 and verse 5. The angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised up his hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are in it, the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and the things that are in it, that there should be delay no longer. So this angel, you picture this magnificent angel, and this angel stands with 1 foot on the sea and 1 foot on the land, and he makes an oath. Now, why would this angel make an oath? Can that thing be turned off? Is that driving you all crazy? It's ticking on something up there. Someone's sneaking up behind me or what? Thank you. Appreciate it. So here's this angel, and he makes an oath, and that shows me that there's something important that's going to happen here. Okay, there's something very important that this angel is going to say to John. So we watch as the angel, he comes, he lifts up his hand to heaven, and he swears by God, he swears by the one who lives forever and ever. And so he's going to say something very important. What is it that he's got to say that is so important? And here is his message. Here's his message. The time, the angel made an oath. I about skipped by that one. Here's it. The time has come for judgment. Now, wait a minute here. What do you mean the time has come for judgment? Isn't that what we've seen all through the book of Revelation? We've seen judgment after judgment after judgment. Well, this one's different. Because what happens here is the angel comes, he puts 1 foot on the sea and 1 foot on the shore, and he's saying, he's indicating I've got control of everything, and he swears to heaven, and the message, the judgment has come. This is what we could call the judgment to end all judgments. Look again what he says in verse 6. He swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are in it, and the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and the things that are in it. Here's what he swears. This is what he says. That there should be delay no longer. Now, some Bible versions say there shall be time no longer. And that indicates us, we thought, it leads us to believe that means that time is going to end. Well, if you look at what it actually says in the original language, it doesn't say that time will end because there's still time after this. The idea is that the time of God's mercy is going to end. There's no more delay. Up till this point, all through time, until we get to this point in Revelation, God is having mercy, and he's having mercy, and he's having mercy. But finally, the message of this strong angel that shows up is that, you know what? God's mercy is just about over. He's not going to put it off anymore. He is going to judge the earth. That is the terrifying message that John is supposed to share, and that's the message we're supposed to share. That God is going to judge the earth. That's a terrifying message because he said, no more delay. I'm not going to put it off anymore. It is time to judge. The mercy has run out of time. If you had kids, you ever know they did something and you tell them, look, you need to confess what you did, right? And they don't do it, and they don't do it, and they don't do it. And finally, you say, okay, you know what? It's too late. I'm going to have to punish you now. You wouldn't confess what I know you did. And it's like when you were in school. You remember being in school and somebody in the class did something, and the whole class has to stay in until the person confesses? I always hated that. Somebody confess, so we can go out for recess, right? And because, somebody confessed, somebody do it. And the teacher's like, okay, I'm done having mercy. Everyone's going to sit down until somebody pays for it, right? And so that's kind of what we have here. It's too late, time's over, God has mercy, and then it's going to be over. And I stop and I think about that, and I think there have been other times when God has had mercy, and He allowed more time. Think of Nineveh. Remember Nineveh? Jonah was supposed to go to Nineveh, and he wouldn't go and all that. But finally he went, and the message Jonah was supposed to give to Nineveh was, God's going to destroy you because of your sin. And to his chagrin, they listened and they obeyed and they repented, and God relented of what he was going to do to them. So we saw that. And we saw it in Sodom. Remember, God was going to destroy Sodom, which he did. But if there would have been 10 righteous people in Sodom, God would have saved it. He was willing to have mercy. And he's had mercy over and over and over and over. But at this point, when we get to this point in the tribulation time, it's finished. God's mercy is going to end. And this is the message that John is supposed to bring back. Look, guys, for now, God is going to have mercy, but there's going to come a time when he's not going to have any more mercy. And it's all going to be over, and there's nothing you can do about it at that point. And John is supposed to go and share that message with people when he gets off this island where he's been held a captive. So, and remember, the angel swore this with an oath. This is not an idea. This is not, oh, God might do it. He says, when God's mercy comes to an end, it is finished. There's no groveling, no complaining, no God changing his mind, nothing. The whole idea of God changing his mind, that's an interesting subject. There's answers for it. God knew what was going to happen. But at this point, there's nothing you can do. God will not have mercy in the end. Eventually, it's going to be too late. And so John is supposed to go back and share this message with people. So then something really weird happens, okay? Remember, this is a vision. This is a vision that John is having. Look in verse 8. Then the voice which I heard from heaven spoke to me again and said, Go, take the little book which is in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea and on the earth. Okay, he's going to take the book. So I went to the angel and said to him, Give me the little book. And he said to me, Take and eat it, and it will make your stomach bitter, but it will be as sweet as honey in your mouth. Then I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it. And it was as sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach became bitter. And he said to me, You must prophesy again about many peoples and nations, tongues, and kings. So why would John have this in a vision? Why would he have to be in this vision and eat a scroll? I mean, how do you eat a book? Remember, it's a vision, okay? It's a vision, and John is getting a message here. And here it is. If we were to go back and look in Ezekiel, it's chapters 2 and 3 of Ezekiel, a very similar thing happens to the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel is supposed to be prophesying to the Israelites and telling them, look, God is going to punish you for your sin. And a part of the vision Ezekiel's getting, he was supposed to do the same thing. He was supposed to eat a scroll, and as he eats this scroll, it's sweet in his mouth. But we're told in Ezekiel what is written in that scroll is woes and lamentations. So when Ezekiel is supposed to eat the scroll in his vision, the idea is, Ezekiel, you eat this, and now it's in you, and you go and you share it with people. That was the idea of the vision. So it wasn't entirely new here to John. So as John gets this vision, he's probably going back. He's a Bible scholar, right? He knew his scriptures. He's thinking, well, Ezekiel had to do the same thing. And as I'm supposed to eat this scroll, it's an indication to me, it's a teaching to me that I'm supposed to go out and I'm supposed to share this message with people. Ezekiel's message was, God is going to punish you. John's message is, God is going to punish you. But there's no more mercy left. It's over, okay, when we get to that point. Thankfully, today, we're not yet to that point. right? Because this happens in the tribulation, which is still future to us. But when we get to that point, it's done. God's mercy is coming to an end. And so here's the message for us. Not only do we have a terrifying message, but we need to share it while there is still time. That's the lesson that John is being told here in John chapter 10. John, eat this thing. It's going to be sweet in your mouth because it's the words of God, but it's going to make your stomach bitter because when you stop and you think about the permanent judgment that God is going to have on this earth and there will be no more mercy left for people, it's not fun. So John's message to take was bittersweet. Why sweet? Remember the scroll he ate was bittersweet. It was sweet in his mouth and bitter in his stomach. It was sweet because at John's time, and even in our time today, God's mercy is still available. That's why it was sweet. Because John could take this sweet message, and the sweet message is, hey, God still has mercy today. And God still has mercy today in 2019, right? He still is willing for people to come to him. He still has mercy. So that was the sweet part of the message, but the bitter part of the message is that his mercy is going to end. And that's the message that we need to share with people too. It's sweet because God's mercy is still available, but it's bitter because God's mercy is going to end. In other words, when we talk about the message that God gives to us, we cannot focus only on the sweet or on the bitter. Because we often want to do one or the other, right? Well, let me just talk to you about sweet Jesus who had the little children come and sit on his lap. And who forgave the adulterous woman. That's the one everybody always wants to pick up on. And you know, he did all these things. He had mercy and love on his people. So let's just focus on that. And let's not talk about when he really gave it to the religious people, right? Let's not talk about the reason his blood was shed was for our sin. No, let's just talk about the sweet and loving Jesus. But then there's some people that's on the other side. It's all y'all bad people. That's all you ever hear, right? That God hates you because of your sin, and that's all the message you hear. The truth is both. Not that he hates you because of your sin, but the truth is both. He hates your sin. He will judge your sin, and if you don't turn to him, you will be permanent judged because of your sin, but he loves you. You got to have both, and that's the message that John was supposed to get from this bittersweet scroll that he ate. Yes, God is going to judge your sin, and at some point there will be no further opportunity, but for now there is an opportunity. We have to have both sides of that when we talk to people. The message is sweet because we can share it with people today. I mean, John gets this message 2,000 years ago, more or less. And he didn't know when this was going to happen. He didn't know when this was going to happen. I mean, for all John knew, this whole tribulation time is going to take place in his lifetime. I mean, Paul seemed to think that too. They didn't know how long this would take. God had mercy then 2,000 years ago, and God is having mercy even today, even now. So I just want us to think a little bit here tonight. Not a very long chapter here, not a whole lot to say about it other than stop and think, how do we share the message of Jesus? I mean, when you share the message of Jesus, Well, first of all, do you share the message of Jesus? That's maybe a better question. But when you do, how do we do it? Do we focus on one side or on the other? Is it all about the love of God? Should we talk about the love of God? Sure. Because if we don't understand the love of God, the judgment doesn't make a lot of sense, because then it's all about judgment. But if all we talk about is the love of God, we don't really understand it unless we understand his hatred towards sin. The fact that God would send his son Jesus to us is not that big a deal unless we understand how bad sin is in his eyes. You see what I'm saying here? We got to have both. And sometimes we can be so, I hate to use the word legalistic because that's not the correct definition, but it's just like we're hard on everything, right? You know, every time you come to church, you get browbeat over everything you've ever done that's not just right. And so you can go to a church like that. Or on the other side, it's all about love and acceptance and do anything you want. That's not the message of Jesus. And I think John would roll over in his grave if he could hear the way that some of us are today. No, guys, that's not it. It's bittersweet message. We have to share the truth that God despises our sin. That God hates our sin so much that he would allow his son to be crucified in our place for that sin. That means he really doesn't like it, okay? He really hates our sin. but yet that he would send his son is the good part. That's the mercy that he has. We've got to have both. And John is munching this scroll, right? He's eating this, and it's sweet in his mouth, and I wonder what it tastes like, right? He's eating this thing, and it's sweet in his mouth because this is a message that he can share today. God's mercy is still there. But then it lands in his stomach. He says, and it's bitter, and it makes it hurt. And he's thinking, you know what? One day this is going to end. When we come to this point in the tribulation time, and we don't know when this tribulation time is even going to start, but when we come to this point, God's mercy is going to end. The angel stands there, one foot on the shore and one on the sea, and he says, nope, there's no more delay any longer. And then things really get bad after this point in the tribulation. There is no more hope after this. So here's the message. Here's the message that John has. The message of Jesus that we need to share is one of both hope and despair. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but I guess it does. The message of Jesus that we need to share is both hope and despair. We need to share both sides when we're talking about who Jesus is. We don't understand his love unless we understand how terrible sin is. And if we only had the terribleness of sin without his love, there would be no salvation. Okay? So think about that. When you think about this bittersweet message, the judgment of God is horrendous on sin. You know, do you have any friends who aren't believers? You know anybody who's not a believer? If we stop and think about what's coming for that person before, unless, they change, that ought to make us scared. It ought to make us care, right? Because we know the judgment that is coming. That ought to prompt us to share a little bit more. We can bring them. Hey, why don't you go to someone, hey, look, I got a bittersweet message for you here. The bitter part is God hates your sin. Yeah, you can maybe word it a different way, right? But the sweet part is that God is having mercy on you today. Today. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes here tonight. Just short message tonight because it's a short chapter. But I just want you to think about this just for a minute before we close. How do you share the message when you get an opportunity to talk to someone about it? Just focus only on the love of God, or you only focus on the hatred of God to sin? We need to focus on both. His love, his mercy is there for us. We've got to understand how awful sin is, though. We share that with people and get a good picture. And I hope you've accepted it. If not, you need to accept that. Not just his love, but his hatred towards sin. Father, tonight we're so grateful that we can have this message here. We can hear about the bittersweet message that, yes, judgment is coming and God's mercy is going to end. But we're so thankful for your mercy that you have given to us even now. That even today that people can still put their trust in you. And the delay is not over yet. We're still in this time where you're holding off the finality of your wrath and you're offering forgiveness. And we're so grateful for that. God, I just ask you would help us when we share this message, that we would share it and that we could help people to understand both the love of God and the justice of God. We could bring those together in the crucifixion of Jesus, which is why it all happened. Help us, Father, to share this message and understand it in our own hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. Be careful going home tonight. It's a little bit slick out there in places. Thank you for coming, and hopefully we get to see on Wednesday night, we're going to keep talking about who Jesus is.